if we aren't receiving that sort of validation in our childhood, if we never received that sort of acknowledgement that we were enough, I do feel it could be harder to develop that on her own. And we certainly want to seek those who can help facilitate that for us. But ultimately, we are going to have to find a way to find it within ourselves. We might need, guides and teachers and supporters around us to enroll us in believing that we're worth that search, but that external validation can only take us so far. We're going to, at some point, have to find a way to internally validate ourselves. And that, is building a relationship with who we are and our own self. And, we don't have a lot of that encouraged from, perhaps the household we grew up in. If our parents weren't being taught that, how could they teach it to us? And we're not, learning that in most of our spiritual traditions. We're actually, really encouraged to divorce ourselves from our sinful self, so to speak. So, if you don't get it in your household, you don't get it in the places of worship, you don't get it in school or from the organization perhaps you work for, where the hell are you going to get it?
Hi, my name is Luella Young. I'm a psychotherapist and coach. And if you're interested in how your lifestyle is affecting your mental health, then you're at the right place. On this show, I interview various guests from across the miles and share how their lifestyle choices affects their sense of self, their wealth, and most importantly, their health. Enjoy the show. It would mean the world to me if you took a quick moment to scroll down, click on the show, rate and review, or share the show. Take a screenshot, share it with me on social media, share it with a friend. They might be able to hear a message that they really need today. And that would also mean the world to me. The funds to run this show come straight out of my pocket. There's no paid advertising. There's no sponsorship. There's no interruptions of any sort, except this one. So yeah, it would mean the world to me. So let me know if you're loving it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of I Think I Can. And today I have with me Kim Curtin. Now, Kim Curtin is called the Wall Street Coach. And she helps traders and others through a cycle of self-sabotage. And for all of you that are in my world, we know how easily we can get on that cycle of self-deprecating and self-sabotage. And I was really interested when I came across Kim's podcast called The Wall Street Coach, because let's face it, she's a woman. She's talking about trading, and she's talking about, really, I think you could almost say the psychology of money, how we need to adopt a certain mindset and emotional intelligence when it comes to thinking about your money and your finances. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I just want to put a little tweak on that. I help people transcend the self-sabotage, because I think sometimes it's just invisible to our own eyes that the sabotage is even happening.
Yeah, we don't even realize we're doing it 100%, and we're all guilty of it. It's just a matter of how long we've been in it, whether it's a few seconds or a few years.
Yeah, I think just paying attention to ways that we perhaps tell ourselves a story repeatedly. And I'm just an advocate of starting to pay really close attention to what those stories are that you've repeatedly told yourself. Because if you start to pay attention, you may discover that those are the stories that you keep living into instead of changing the story.
And how people can really run into some problems, like especially in the concerns of managing your finances. It's something that's like, as you said before I pressed record, sex and politics are spoken about way more than finances. But I mean, and in my work as a relationship coach, I mean, yeah, it is common. Finances and sex is a couple of the main reasons why people aren't able to work it out.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I, I
I,
would I would say
yeah,
more finances than
yeah.
sex, to be honest with you.
I
Yeah.
would agree. I would agree. I think most of us haven't done our own work about our relationship to money. And our relationship to money is going to be so visceral. It's sort of, the very foundation of our sense of feeling safe, feeling secure. And especially if we're with a partner who has a radically different relationship to money than we do, it's going to cause, constant tension for
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah.
There's a new book Jared Dillian just came out with called No Worries, and he has two identifying features: a cheap F, which you can fill in the blank of what the rest of that word means,
Mhm.
or a high roller. And neither of them are things he would advocate. But if you have somebody who considers themselves a high roller in a relationship with somebody who sees themselves as cheap, they're going to constantly disagree on the most basic, you know, household expenses and or weekend expenses or retirement responsibilities. So I think it's really important to understand, okay, what is my relationship to money, and that person I'm potentially going to be, living with and spending money with or saving money with. What is that going to be like? So it's
Yeah.
pretty important to ask those questions way before you get married.
Oh my gosh, and you can even take it more like, and that's a macro level. You can even bring it more to a micro level, because this is what I've seen as well. And even in my own relationship, I'm not going to lie, is that, you know, one might be considered a saver in a specific area and then a real spender in others. Like, for example, I'm one that, will probably like tear off half a paper roll just so, I don't waste.
Yeah,
But I have no problem spending, my money in other areas, right? Like,
yeah,
so it's interesting. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's different
Um,
for everybody. Olivia Mellon, too, she has a great book called Money Harmony. And it's a book specifically for couples to,
hmm,
get clear on their relationship to money. She has an assessment in that book. She used to have it online, but I don't think she was able to maintain the website. She had gotten ill. But her assessment inside that book is a great, short. It's not the most robust assessment, but it'll give an individual a sense of what their money type is. She calls, she has different words for them, but one of them is, a hoarder, a person who's always saving their money. She also calls one of the descriptions is a money monk. And that's a person who feels like, to spend too much money is somehow dirty or
hmm.
sinful or, irresponsible. So she just helps us all see, what those tendencies are so that we can navigate them, first of all, for ourselves, never mind, who we're partnered up with.
Okay, perfect. So you've given us two books, Money
Yeah.
Harmony, and the first one was,
No Worries by Jared Dillian.
yeah,
And maybe I'll give one. I have so many. I've read, probably
yeah,
over 50 or 60 books specific to money.
yeah.
Um, Lost and Found by Janine Roth is a really powerful book. And because you have, predominantly women audience, I think that is really important. The subtitle is called One Woman's Story of Losing Her Money and Finding Her Life. Janine is known for her work around she had struggled with bulimia and anorexia, and she'd done a lot of work about her relationship to food. That is, what most people probably know her about. And she talks about in Lost and Found how while she had done all this work about her relationship to food and or to herself and different things she had lived through, she'd never really done any work around her relationship to money. And unfortunately, we discover in that book that she had all her successful bestsellers, all the profits from those books invested with Bernie Madoff. And she never questioned, how he was able to continue to have such incredible returns for so long, because she speaks about how she wasn't really connected consciously to her money. How was her money being invested? And of course, she lost it all. And so it forced her to really take a hard look at how she had been able to be so self-aware in her relationship to these other places in her life. And yet she had avoided taking responsibility, ownership, command, if you will, of her own finances. And the price she paid for it, so
Wow.
powerful book for women who, have a tendency to surrender perhaps to their husband, to their accountant, to their investor, and not question because they don't feel smart enough or informed enough. But there's only one way to become informed, and that is to ask a hell of a lot of questions. And I would just say, if any woman is made to feel dumb for asking those questions, you better find yourself a new advisor, because they are not, coming from a place of what's in your best interest.
Okay. So, Kim, why don't we, how about if you sort of explain your story? Like, how did you get into all of this, and who are the type of people that you feel most comfortable coaching and enjoy coaching?
Yeah. Well, I became a coach because I hired a coach about 20 years ago. I had done Landmark Landmark Forum. It was a life-changing course for me. It just opened up my eyes to see how I had been living as a victim, how I had been living based on stories that I was telling myself repeatedly from the different challenges I had endured. And as I began to have that paradigm shift, I was hungry for more. So I wound up finding a coach that was really a radical different experience than therapy. I'd had therapy actually at a quite early age. I had asked my parents for my first therapist at 10 years old.
Wow.
So I had therapy. I, knew how to get some tools, but coaching to me just felt so much more powerful. It moved so much quicker. And it also received me as naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, not as broken, which to me is a paradigm shift of development. So I hired a coach, an executive coach. I was in the finance world at the C-suite level, and it was so impactful that I felt really called to become a coach. So I walked away from, a decade of working in finance at the C-suite level to start my own coaching practice. The only downside was that it was just shy of the '08 crisis. So initially I was, very busy, but then as we got closer to 2008, September, I was like, ooh, I was watching the business I, did starts decline, and I got really scared. And I had a good friend who said, if you're born to coach, just keep coaching and get a side hustle. Start working back in finance if you have to just, take care of the bills. So I did. And I happened to just start coaching outside the stock exchange, pretty much once a week during the crisis, because there was just so much mayhem down there. I thought, what a time to try to be a contribution to people. Maybe I'll get some work out of it. So I did, coaching on a bench at lunchtime,
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty unexpected. And, the market dropped. The first day I got down there, the market dropped October 7th, 2008. And, I just kept going back. I was coaching, traders who had been fired off the stock exchange floor, CEOs, with their box of their desk contents in hand, secretaries, bike messages, like everybody started lining up for coaching. I do 20-minute sessions, speed coaching. And the reporters that were covering, the story, saw me sitting there coaching people. And they were like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I had a little sign like Lucy in the Peanuts. It said the coach is in instead of the doctors in. It said the coach is in.
Cute.
And so, that caused some attention. But one of the reporters in particular did a whole story that, aired on CNN. They did video and, content, and basically called me the Wall Street Coach. And I was like, wow, that's an excellent name. I think I'm going to try
Yes.
to trademark that. So I have since trademarked it. And that was, back in 2008. So yeah, it's been a long road. And I coach, I'm sort of industry agnostic. I certainly know well the finance world. I've been involved in that world now for almost 30 years. But honestly, my favorite kind of person to coach is a person who's ready for change, ready for transformation, somebody who's 100% committed to being with perhaps the hard truths they know they've avoided for a long time. So yeah, people who are ready to stop being the victim of their life and wanting to be kind of the hero of their own life, even if they think that might be far-fetched. I'm heavily influenced by Joseph Campbell's work. He's, the mythologist and the person who identified for us the hero's model, that hero's journey model that I truly believe each of us is on. And I feel his work just helps us to see that the challenges and the pain that we go through is actually all in service to our up-leveling, in service to us becoming, the hero of our own life. And I truly feel once people get the tools and they start to have that sort of a mindset shift, the Campbell says, where there were only doors and walls, there will suddenly be open spaces. So it's just, mindset shift can be transformational, and you can see opportunity that perhaps before was not available for you to see before. So I did have an unusual childhood. I did have to gather a lot of tools early in my childhood to navigate it. But I feel like, wow, I've been collecting these tools for so many years now. What's the point of having, a robust Sears Master Craftsman tool collection unless I share those tools? So that's what, all of this work that I do is in service to, trying to share those tools with those who, want to mitigate the challenge they feel internally and perhaps externally.
Yeah, no, I think you distinguished nicely between what therapy and coaching is therapy is, when you're trying to find the source or root cause of why you're sort of behaving the way you do. And then, once you sort of gather that information, then it's more like, okay, now I'm ready for change. Now I'm ready. Like you're looking forward now rather than looking behind you. And it's exciting. That's when you hire a coach. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So this whole, like a lot of people, like as you said, you're industry agnostic, and I understand that 100%. But for those who are kind of interested in like what are traders? Like, how is that different from an investment broker, or like what does that even mean? Like, can you be a trader in one industry or more, more than one like?
Well, a trader, a day trader is a person who is usually, not always, managing their own money. Uh, and they're
Mm,
going into trades usually multiple times a day. There are different types of trading, like swing trading. Maybe they'll hold a position for a few days, weeks, or months. But for the most part, a day trader is a person who is going, in and out of selling or buying based on a collection of variables that they're watching. It requires a really deep level of, comfort with discomfort, if you will,
mhm,
being able to follow your rules and not be swayed perhaps by opportunities that are ones you're not that familiar with. I think there are not as many women in day trading as there are men. And that is very unfortunate because the statistics are that women are actually better at day trading than men.
mm,
They are not as ruled by, the testosterone, and
mhm,
they are not as attached to their performance as a
mm,
lot of male traders are, because men have been also very conditioned to identify who they are with what they do, whereas women are able to have a little bit of separation between those
mhm,
two experiences. The women traders that I do know that I have worked with, they will have their own struggles too, but they will not have the same struggles that I see the men have. The basic difference between a trader and investor is an investor is somebody who's, interested in investing in a company for usually a much longer period of time. They want
mm,
to see, a company grow over the next 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, maybe less than that today. We seem to all be a little, even investors are so short-term focused than they used to be. But
mhm,
for the most part, that would be the difference. But a lot of the traders that I have worked with are I've worked with institutional traders. Those are traders who are trading an organization's money, but then there are the day traders who are trading their own money. They are, ultimately working for themselves. So I think I've just seen traders very much as entrepreneurial. Just, I've been an entrepreneur now for 17 years. I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. So I think there's a mindset when you're going to work for yourself, when you're going to take something on like that, that appeals to me, because I think entrepreneurs are, kind of the lifeblood of this country. And so I like that independent kind of spirit of somebody who wants to do it on their own, so to speak. But I would love to see more women, look into it, see if it's something that they would want to do. It would certainly, there's look, the market is open to everybody. You don't need a license to go and trade your own money. There is the PDT rule, which means for you to have less, cost, let's say, with your account, you have to have a certain amount of money that you can trade. But I think it would be better for women to consider that as opposed to just surrendering leadership of everything. I don't see a
mhm,
lot of women, not that every woman is built to be a trader. It's a very intense commitment.
mhm.
But I don't know that enough women consider it, and that's unfortunate. Yeah, I
And
myself am not a trader. Uh, Trust me, I've really considered it a lot over the years, but I'm running a business and that just takes all my time. I have a podcast.
mm,
I'm constantly working with clients. So you have to kind of pick and choose where, and
yeah,
honestly, I love coaching.
yeah.
Trading is fascinating. I can appreciate it, but I don't want to be looking at my screens all day like a trader does. And it just doesn't fascinate me the way, you know, empowerment and personal development does. So I, have
Yeah.
chosen not to go down that path. But, at the end of the day, I think regardless of whether you're going to be a trader or not, or you're managing your own investments, being clear at what your relationship to money is, especially for women, is so important. And And hopefully, if nothing else, we can both encourage them to do that work because it's worth it. It's
Yeah.
definitely worth it.
100%. So, okay. So before, and this is maybe even my own clarification more
Yeah.
than anybody else, but like before we get into more diving in more into the relationship of money, um, like when you say trading, is it any sort of EFT, or what exactly
It
are
can
the,
be.
okay.
You really can be so many kinds. You can trade there's so much out there for a trader to decide to go down. And I think that's a big part of it as well. I think it's so important for every trader to really get clear on who they are, what kinds of temperament do they have. I just interviewed two very different traders who had very different styles. And, one of them was saying, when I try to trade his style of trading, I couldn't sleep at night. And the other guy said, when I tried to do his style, I couldn't sleep at night. So I think it's about, first of all, being clear on your temperament, what you feel you naturally gravitate to. Are you, somebody who is comfortable with risk? Obviously your account has to be comfortable with risk, what your capital is. But I think getting really clear on kind of your temperament, your personality, that potentially informs what and how you're going to trade. And, there is not a lack of gurus out there that would be happy to teach you their style of trading. But even the traders who have gone into a different collection of styles, there are different times where the market is going to have a lot of activity in one particular style and perhaps not in another particular style. So I think it's important for a trader to, first of all, just understand what is going to be most appropriate for your temperament, your risk tolerance, your ability to, move on a dime. Is that the kind of pressure you want to be under every day? Or are you looking for something that is less pressure filled? And, then you would decide among those options.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, honestly, it sounds like somebody who's addicted to dopamine, somebody who also loves jumping out of planes and
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that. So, okay, but you mentioned something which, I mean, that's why I love talking about all different topics on my podcast, is because like it's really everything. I feel like it always distills down to getting to know yourself.
yeah,
Whether that's choosing a career, a
yeah,
partner, the way you want to handle your money,
yeah,
rather than just sort of living, mindlessly,
yeah,
becoming a lemming and following what everybody else is doing because they seem to be quite popular, or
yeah,
or they seem to be making a lot of money, or um, why this is not taught more in schools, I
yeah.
have no idea. It's like the government wants to keep people, broke, dumb, and divorced. Sometimes I feel like, it's frustrating,
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah. Well,
So
lucky for us, we have access to uh, everything we need in our phone. I mean, we
yeah.
all have.
Hmm.
There are, Khan Academy. There's education now. There's free courses from MIT to Harvard. I mean,
Yeah.
the government and or the powers that be might not have our best interests at heart, but we don't need them to change our life. Like there is so much available to all of us with the devices we all own now. We can change our life with that device. We can,
Yeah.
if we don't have the money to buy all the books we want, we can get them from a library. Like there's
Yeah.
still so much available to each of us to transform our circumstances that there's really, no excuse to not take advantage of, oh, if I want my life to look different, how do I go about creating that change?
It's funny. We had this exact conversation last night at the dinner table. So I'm going to tell you that one of my children, who's male and is sort of in all this stuff, he said exactly what you did, which is 100% true. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we have all of this information at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And then my other daughter, who is perhaps more, psychologically, I don't know, in tune with people's conditioning, like with me as well, right? Like that's the thing though, is that unfortunately, we are conditioned mainly by society, primarily our parents up until 18 or so, of thinking a certain way. And like as we were speaking about in terms of, savers, spenders, cheap
Yeah.
as F,
Yeah.
or whatever that is, that conditioning runs pretty darn deep. And that's where we have to work at our self-awareness so strongly,
Yeah.
and really ask ourselves, why are we behaving in this way that we know is just not really, or hasn't really served us really well? So
Yeah.
I'm guessing, maybe Kim, like, can you maybe take some examples of some people that you've worked with, whether it's an executive, whether it's a trader, whether it's a woman, whether it's a man, and just sort of like, are there some cases that whether you work with that you're just like, oh wow, this is so rewarding because of XYZ?
Yeah, they're all rewarding if a person is coming into the coaching, ready to take a look at
Yeah.
what those stories are. When I speak to a prospect, I'm always looking for that because I know that for them to come in and invest the time and the capital in this work, it isn't going to really serve them if they're not fully ready to perhaps be with the hard truths about how they're operating. I think the key is to be in a place where you're willing to take 100% responsibility for your life. And that, even for my own journey, it changed everything. I, certainly knew, fairly young that there were costly ways I saw, my caretakers operating. So I think I was aware, like, okay, maybe there are less costly ways I have to find out about. But until I really did that landmark forum, I had not gotten the memo that I could take 100% responsibility for my entire life. And that was a pivotal moment for me because it facilitated that I held all the power. I thought I had been a victim of this
Mhm.
journey so far. And when I got the memo that, like, no, wait a minute, I can take ownership, that means I get to have a say in how the rest of my life looks. That's when everything kind of opened up. And so that's, ultimately what I'm, hopefully facilitating for my clients is having them take a look at what happens if you don't take, it's not about blame. It's about ownership. It's about a willingness to take what is so and now decide that you're going to start rewriting what the stories are about your journey thus far. And, a play on words perhaps, but I really like, to say to folks not to use the word why when looking inwardly, because it has a tendency to, cause us to justify and defend. When we're asked, why did you do that? We all kind of shrink and contract. But I really prefer the word, what do you think is the reason this is how you respond to this, that, or the other thing? And that perhaps opens up the door to more curiosity and more neutrality. And I think those are the two key things that whenever we're doing self-development work, whenever we're going to start to explore through books or courses or, just a spiritual kind of journey, we want to get very curious, and we want to step into as much neutrality as possible, because it's so easy to go into judgment, especially when it comes to ourselves. It's so easy to make ourselves wrong. Rick Carson talks about this a lot in his book, Taming the Gremlin. We have these inner saboteurs, inner critics, inner gremlins that love to find what's wrong with us. They usually are voices that have been there for so long that we don't even have the distinction between our own voice and their voice. But those inner critics are constantly making us feel like garbage. And that, I think, also gets in the way of people being able to be self-aware, because they don't know how to be self-aware neutrally. They will slip into judgment because that inner critic will come along and, tell that person perhaps they're worthless, they'll never succeed at this, who do you think you are, and so on and so forth. So that, unless you get the distinction that there is this inner, perhaps, saboteur that keeps keeping you down, I do think it is hard for people to step into that place of neutrality that ultimately is going to facilitate them being able to look those hard truths in the eye. So usually, at the beginning of any coaching engagement, I'll be strongly recommending they do the work at unearthing these inner saboteurs, inner gremlins, because that voice has to be, it's not like these voices ever go away, but we need to at least identify that it is the voice with the microphone in our head. And they usually are getting a lot more airtime than we even realize. So, one of the catchphrases Rick teaches all of us is simply notice. That can become your greatest weapon. Just notice what that self-talk is. Perhaps, like we're talking about money, what is the self-talk when, you spend money that you didn't plan on? What is the self-talk when you don't spend the money? Like, just take a look at how and what that inner voice is saying. And if it's using the words would, should, or could, you're listening to a gremlin. You're not listening to your own inner guidance, because your own inner guidance isn't going to make you feel like garbage.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned one of the things, like, because you're speaking so much about self-awareness and becoming, mindful of, first of all, the way you behave, but then, like you said, instead of asking why, what is the reason? Because I do see, clients also getting stuck on the why. It's very easy to do. It's sort of like, why? Yeah, why? And yeah, a person can really stay stuck in the why. So I'm glad you brought up the other perspective of just saying for what reason.
Yeah.
And then, like, not staying there long, right? It's sort of like, some people are very good at also going, I really don't care how I just know that it's like, this is a behavior that doesn't seem to be favorable in my relationships. It keeps on making me run into problems, it's sort of like,
Werner Erhard, the creator of Landmark, he said, understanding is the booby prize. Like, okay, so we understand. Well, is that going to change anything now? Like,
right.
Who cares? Who cares why? Like, it's almost irrelevant. What matters is, what are you going to do from this point onward? But I think it's easy to stay stuck in the understanding because, it delays us from having to face the dragon that ultimately we have to face if we want to move to the next level. It's hard to be with emotions. I have 5 practices that inform my coaching. Those are talked about in my book, Transforming Wall Street. And those 5 are, first is self-responsibility, taking ownership for what your life looks like, no matter what it looks like. A willingness to actually be with what's hard to be with. Understand that learning how to serve hard to be with emotions is a necessary component to self-development. You're going to have to grieve. You're going to have to, get angry over the things that perhaps you've never let yourself get angry or grieve over before. So I call that emotional non-resistance. I also speak at length. I'm also heavily influenced by Marshall Rosenberg. He was the creator of nonviolent communication, which is a needs-based language, helping people to understand that if they don't have their basic needs met, it's going to be hard to transcend feelings such as depression, apathy, anger, frustration, paralyzation. Those are all feelings that we have when needs are not met. Most people, in my experience, don't understand what their basic needs are. So how can they become a steward to get them met? If you don't even know what you need, how can you secure them? So, teaching people, helping them identify what their needs are is also an incredibly empowering place to go for people, because it helps them understand themselves better. And it also helps them not be upset or confused by the hard to be with feelings they have. Like you can't help but have frustration, anger, depression, apathy if you're not getting your basic needs met. So that also just helps people, I think, exhale a little bit. And then, I practice 4 is embracing your heroic journey, seeing yourself as a hero on the journey of your life. And that just shifts the paradigm as well to a place of empowerment that, what if all the trials and tribulations you've gone through are all necessary to up-level you to that hero you are born to do. All the stories, that we listen to, the fairy tales, from Harry Potter to the Matrix and Neo, like it is Luke Skywalker. It's all about that hero having to get stronger, having to transcend the things that scared him or her on the start of their journey. So when you start to see yourself through that lens, everything shifts. And then, a willingness to be mindful, a willingness to be in this moment is the 5th practice, being not in the past, not in the future, but in this present moment, which is the only moment really that ever is. But, it's easy to kind of get caught in the past and or the future and live in those 2 places instead of the one we're in.
No, I love the 5 practices. The one that I feel like I might get caught up maybe a little bit the most is the hero's journey, like just sort of like see myself as a hero.
Yeah.
Do you find that people have a hard time with that? Like,
not when you start to hear what the phases are. I have a hero's journey map that I've, outlined, informed by Joe Campbell's work. There's a fabulous documentary that walks a lot of people through it. Of course, there's The Power of Myth, which is Bill Moyer's interview of Joe at Skywalker Ranch, because Joe's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, is what George Lucas read and adapted into Star Wars from Joseph's book. And so they filmed this 6-hour interview at that ranch. But in that, 6-hour conversation, we can easily see how all of us are really heroic characters and looking always to these heroes, from Jesus to Muhammad to Buddha. But that is, that was something I saw when I was quite young, and it had a huge impact on me. But there is a kind of an appetizer of that experience in a dear friend's documentary called Finding Joe, the movie.com, and you can rent or buy it. And that gives you that overview of Joe Campbell's, hero's adventure for everybody to see how they could self-identify to it. But I can say, to you and anybody listening, everybody usually has been to hell and back a handful of times. And everybody knows what it's like to endure and to survive and to get through, whether it's a heartbreak or it's a person that betrayed you, or it's a job that didn't work out, or a health crisis, people know what that experience is like because that is part of the life experience. But instead of seeing yourself as a victim of it, most people look at what they've gone through from the other side and see how it actually emboldened them, perhaps strengthened them, helped them understand themselves and the world around them radically different. Infrequently will you hear people say that they regret it happening to them. They can see all the benefits, not in the moment per se, but on the other side of how that made them into who they are today. So I think it's a matter of just noticing, oh, wow, all those things that at the time were really hard to go through are all of the building blocks that have created the who I am now. You couldn't be who you are now without those challenges, without those, crossroads that asked everything of you. So to me, it's not that hard for most people to see that because they can name off the top of their head the 500 things they've been through.
Well, as you spoke, and then it all just came to me. All the challenges that I've made through, on the other side of my life. Just, the way you explained it, it was very easy. It was very easy. And I think we can very easily get caught in that self-sabotage. It's sort of, blaming ourselves and not loving ourselves. Like, I feel like that's the number one reason that people come to therapy for. They don't see it, in that moment, that's why they're coming to therapy. But it's sort of like they're seeking, what I would describe almost as an external self-esteem. It's sort of external esteem. The self is taken away. It's sort of like, I need someone else to tell me that I'm a good person.
Okay. Yeah. And look, we are tribal beings. I think it is really, if we aren't receiving that sort of validation in our childhood, if we never received that sort of acknowledgement that we were enough, I do feel it could be harder to develop that on her own. And we certainly want to seek those who can help facilitate that for us. But ultimately, we are going to have to find a way to find it within ourselves. We might need, guides and teachers and supporters around us to enroll us in believing that we're worth that search. But that external validation can only take us so far. We're going to, at some point, have to find a way to internally validate ourselves. And that, is building a relationship with who we are and our own self. And, we don't have a lot of that encouraged from, perhaps the household we grew up in. If our parents weren't being taught that, how could they teach it to us? And we're not, learning that in most of our spiritual traditions. We're actually, really encouraged to divorce ourselves from our sinful self, so to speak. So, if you don't get it in your household, you don't get it in the places of worship, you don't get it in school or from the organization perhaps you work for, where the hell are you going to get it?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
That's why I think it's so important for people to just, ask themselves, wow, what is the only person that's going to be with you at your moment of birth and death is the one you have with yourself. So I think that's somebody you might want to pay some attention to because they're going to be with you the longest. And you want to know, what is that relationship to self that I have? If it's coming from a place of always judging me, then, I would question, is it even you have the relationship with, or is it just your inner gremlin or inner saboteur? And finding that relationship, working on that relationship is more important than any external relationship you'll ever have.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Wonderfully summed up. So, is there, I know we're coming to the end here. Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about either yourself or their mindset towards money?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, I would say, that their mindset to money possibly isn't their mindset. It could be that they
Mm,
just adopted without questioning uh, either their parents or their parents' parents or their neighbors or their, friends from school's mindset or their neighbor currently's mindset. I would just do an inquiry if the relationship you have to money is actually one that you cultivated on your own, because it's rare for most of us to not be heavily influenced by these, different areas. Even just coming from, let's say, a labor background or blue collar background, if we have, relatives who made their money with blood, sweat, and tears, to succeed in any kind of way without backbreaking effort, can feel fraudulent, can feel like,
mhm.
is it okay to make this money just by pressing buttons all day? When I saw my dad, kill himself to put food on the table, there could be these invisible, kind of relationships to how you think money should be made that potentially put a ceiling over your head around success. Like, I I've spoken to entrepreneurs and traders who have that invisible glass ceiling of, how much money is okay to make, as if there could be guilt or shame if too much is made, that, you want to do some workaround before you find yourself, doing really well and then self-sabotaging that success because you feel uncomfortable at a certain level with wealth. It could
Mhm,
be just
mhm.
invisible drivers holding you back, which is part of why lottery winners and or young athletes or rock stars have a tendency to get themselves back down to zero, because they don't understand or feel comfortable at that level of wealth if they've never experienced it before. So their tendency to manage it or, be comfortable with it could be compromised if they haven't done work around having a lot of it. So if anybody's listening and you guys want to be successful financially, make sure you don't have any beliefs that are telling you, that only bad people make a lot of money, because that will be sabotaging you. Who wants to be a bad person? So you will find yourself suddenly, you know, all the money you maybe make, you suddenly find has to be spent to keep
Mhm.
your temperature, at what you're used to. And the temperature gauge is something T. Harv Eker talks about. Last book is Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And he talks at length about how we have this, invisible set point, and we have to be sure to recognize, is that set point the set point we want to live at the rest of our life with money?
Mm, wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as a tradition, well, I should say as a tradition, when I actually remember to do this, is I ask a guest at the end of the show a question that my previous guest has left for them.
Okay.
So it's every sort of industry, right? Like I
Yeah.
have lots of lifestyle topics that I speak about. Um, so the question is, as okay, so as you age, what's one sort of practice that you are now giving yourself permission to do that you might not have 10 years ago?
I think probably just my living in Hawaii.
Mm,
I'm a New Yorker, born and bred. My uh, most of the business over the years was at the result of my networking or being in Manhattan, hustling for business.
mhm.
And these last 10 years living in Hawaii is a very different lifestyle. I'm definitely not out there, networking like I used to, but
Yeah.
I'm doing outrigger paddling and swimming and,
Mhm.
loving living here. So I think just the fact that I've given myself permission to live in a place such as this instead of New York City was due to older and wiser.
That's a perfect example. I mean, like you're right. As you're like, I was wondering about that. I was wondering if well, obviously you did start in New York, but like, yeah, just it's such a different
Very
environment.
different,
Oh my
very
God.
different, radically
Yeah.
different. But it's been
Yeah.
really good for me to slow down myself and to
Yeah.
let myself be nourished by, nature here is just, you're just gobsmacked driving down the road every day. So to
Mm.
have access and permission, give myself permission to live in a place as beautiful as this, that was a huge,
Mm.
jumping off a ledge,
Mm.
leaping off the cliff. I still
Mm.
can't believe I did it sometimes, but
Mm.
I'm really glad I did.
Well, I would think it would be so, even though you don't maybe network, it has so much more advantages in terms of the type of work you do. Because to me, when you're put in that situation that you cannot help notice what's around you,
Yeah,
like you are essentially becoming more mindful.
yeah,
Like because
absolutely,
yeah, because
absolutely. I can see the difference for my own journey and how I show up for clients. I'm not who I was before I moved here 10 years. It's, this place just softens you in all the right ways and has opened my heart, has opened up, just how I show up as a woman and as a coach. So I'm so grateful that I, you know, said yes when I felt the call, but it was definitely uh not like, what is that famous saying, right? God laughs when you tell him what your plans are or tell her what your plans are. So
right,
yeah, wasn't part
right.
of the plan, but
Yeah.
apparently it was part of the plan. I just wasn't in on the memo.
Right, right. Oh, it's wonderful. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm so happy, delighted that I had a chance to speak with you, Kim, and um yeah, I mean, I would have ran with that name as well if I'd been dubbed the name the Wall Street Coach, but from my time with you today, it's so much more than
Mm.
trading. I mean, I think to me, all we spoke about was psychology today.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Okay. Well, and I'm going to keep you on for a second because I'm
Sure.
going to grab a
Sure.
question from
You
you
got it. You got it.
for the next one.
You
Okay.
got it. You got
Okay.
it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
you're very welcome. Everyone else, have a great week. Bye. Thanks once again for joining me on another great episode of I Think I Can podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe below so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next week, treat each day like it was your last, because each new day is a privilege that we shan't take for granted. Cheers and have a great week. Bye-bye.